Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, a national embarrassment? Welcome to Mark and Pete, and tonight we consider what happens when a royal scandal refuses to fade quietly into the tapestry. Yes, this is Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now here's our first thought.
Above all else, beneath our dignity we do abhor, if standards fall we should deplore, and side by side we must ensure that nobody is above the law.
Yeah.
Well, when it comes to royalty, we often look with great regard. But then we come on to recent events. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been arrested and indeed then investigated and released on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. Now, Mr. Pete, this is a royal saga that's been running for some time. We'll dig deep into the detail, but I ask you, first of all, what do you think of this particular affair? More importantly, where does it leave King Charles and the royal family?
Well, the royal family hold a very special place in Britain. Yes, it's a constitutional monarchy, but culturally, they're almost like an exemplar family. They're meant to be a good family. That's how they fit in. They don't have much actual power, but they have influence, some of which is vested in the fact that they're a good Christian family, and the king or queen is head of the Church of England. And if we're going to look at this from a Christian point of view, let's take a verse from the Psalm. Psalm 101 says, I will behave wisely in a perfect way. I'll walk within my house with a perfect heart. This is the point. I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. And I think what's happened here is Andrew has perhaps because of some core problem with sexual perversion within him, but things have been set before his eyes. People have been set before his eyes. He's been tempted. That's his issue. And King Charles, well, things were set before his eyes and he ignored them. And I think that's the issue. He's put the whole of the monarchy in some sort of jeopardy by his lack of action.
Well, what's interesting is that the police actually arrested Andrew because originally that some of the scandals that we've seen in the media in recent times relate to Andrew's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
And the allegations have been quite evident, both in terms of photographic evidence, emails, etc. What's interesting is that the saga continues, where basically, as the trade envoy for Britain, Andrew really has also been accused of perhaps some wrongdoing in that fashion. Now, one could actually definitely focus on the first issue, which is around his relationships. Allegedly, with people who are of an underage. But when it comes to the other side of it and giving away trade secrets or even national secrets, that takes it to another level. So one of the things, Mr. Pete, is should Andrew now be looked at in a different light and possibly even charged for treason?
Well, now that Andrew isn't part of the royal family, although, as you may come on to, he's still technically in line for the throne, but he's no longer
Yes.
holds the title of prince. Uh, he can be treated as a commoner. That's my understanding of the law. That now he can be treated as a commoner. Certainly, him being arrested seems to indicate that, and that would mean that um, he can be looked into, investigated in all way. Now, of course, kings and queens are not exempt from being charged with murder and that sort of thing. But normally, some sort of scandalous activity would have been brushed aside, ignored, well, at least treated privately. And I guess that's why the king thought he could look the other way. He didn't know the extent of what had gone on, I guess. I don't know. But he did have a warning. So he should have looked into it. But he probably thought, well, these things are just brushed under the carpet. But now, having been stripped of his title, as the king was sort of forced into doing, really, by public pressure, yeah, I think Andrew can be charged, and he will be investigated more thoroughly. And I think it's sunk home with him. There's an interesting image of him in the car on the way back from having been
Yes.
taken down to the police station, where he looks like it looks like death called down, as they say. He looks like he's
Quite.
stared into the abyss, and the abyss stared back at him, calling him home. It looks like every worst nightmare has just happened to him, and yeah, I think he's wrong there. I think he's going to get worse. So yeah, I mean, he could end up in prison.
Well, what's interesting in the infamous interview that he did with the BBC a few years
Yeah.
ago, where he claimed that he did not sweat. Now, if you looked at some of the media, it says in the titles, he's sweating now, to your
Yes.
point, in terms of
Yes.
what might be coming. But
Yes.
I do ask the other thing, which is you mentioned about King Charles III. Now, what's interesting is if Andrew were to be put into a court of law, effectively he would be up against his brother because essentially all courts, certainly at that level, are under the royal remit, and of course that in itself plays some strange dynamics. We've never seen anything like this before. If you think of scandals that have happened in royalty before, when we think of Edward VIII abdicating, and we think of many other scandals that have happened, some of them have been trivial and others a little bit more serious. But of all the ones that we've got, this touches upon not just the acts of individuals, but even the constitution, because this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So, from the point of view of how we move this forward, I think it has wider national implications rather than just implications on one man.
Mm. Yeah, I think this is what just to take this scandal, this situation as a whole. This focusing on Andrew is an interesting decision by the mainstream media. I guess all the talk is currently about Andrew. It's not just him. He's an easy target for saturation of the media because he's an ex-prince and everyone's very interested in it with salacious material. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't be interested, because of course it's because of the implications to do with the monarchy that we've just been discussing. But there were certain well-known people, politicians, certain billionaires who have been implicated as well. So
True.
Andrew is a very useful scapegoat for them.
Ah, now that's an interesting angle, isn't it? Because when we look at Andrew, we're sort of thinking about his role as the trade envoy. We're thinking about the scandals that maybe his visits to Vietnam, Singapore, China, as well as his visits to Epstein. Yes, does this actually sort of really cover up and paper over the cracks elsewhere? I suppose that you have to say, and this is really, really important. Ironically, Andrew has not been charged with anything. Now, I'm not saying he's not guilty of something. I'm sure as the course of events unfold, it's possible that there will be evidence, and there may be evidence that hasn't come to light. But I'm just going to throw this into the mix, which I think is really important. What if he's innocent?